Hello, everyone, and welcome to the second Emmy nominees panel. My name is Joaquin Elizondo, and I am the creator of the Hollywood Editing Mentor program and podcast. I'm so excited to host this conversation with these talented creatives in post-production. Please join me in welcoming our panelists. First up, we have two members of the editing team of Netflix's Escaping Twin Flames. Please welcome Mimi Wilcox.
Hi, thanks so much for having us.
And Martin Biehn.
Pleasure to be here.
Great to have you here. We also have editors on Welcome to WREXHAM. Please welcome Michael Anthony Brown.
Hello, hello.
And Michael Oliver.
Hello, thanks for having us.
Well, it's great to have you here. And first of all, congrats on the Emmy noms. I'm sure you're very excited. How does it feel?
Feels awesome.
Yeah, pretty great.
Well, awesome. I cannot wait to hear more about your projects that you worked on. And that's actually how we're going to start off. Can you each briefly tell us about the projects that you have up for Emmy contention? We'll start off with the team from Escaping Twin Flames.
You want to start us off, Mimi?
Sure, yeah. So Escaping Twin Flames is a 3-episode docuseries about a cult called Twin Flames Universe. And it follows some of the former members of that cult, as well as family members of loved ones who are still in the cult, to kind of expose Twin Flames Universe and follow some of the work of the former members.
Yeah, no, so it's an incredible doc, and it involved a tremendous amount of footage that we had to go through hundreds and hundreds of hours of archival. We had footage of all the old meetings from the cult, so we had to go through and actually mine through all that stuff and really get it all organized before we could start cutting.
Yeah, and I guess that's one more thing to mention is that this was a primarily online cult. And so all of these meetings took place over Zoom. And so there was, countless hours of these recorded meetings.
So awesome. How about the team from Welcome to WREXHAM?
So welcome to WREXHAM. This is our second nomination. This is for season 2 of Welcome to WREXHAM. And season 1, it was basically an idea from Rob McElhaney and Ryan Reynolds to purchase a soccer club in Wales called WREXHAM AFC. And the series follows the journey from their inception of the idea to learning about the world of Wales and football in general and the English football system, and chronicles the changes that the town underwent from that beginning to their ultimate rise up and out of the English football league, the 5th tier.
Yeah, so we follow the team through an entire season. So season 2 was just on one season. So it's like from August all the way until probably May do we follow the team. So it's quite a long time that we're with the team.
Awesome. Well, you were mentioning, I was talking about here, documentaries, lots of footage to work with. And I'm really always interested in hearing from editors, documentary editors, how they approach the amount of footage, right, and crafts the story. And so again, this is a question for everyone. As documentary editors, obviously you work with a lot of footage, and so how did you select and organize footage on the show? Bring us into your process. How does that look like?
With WREXHAM, it was really interesting because oftentimes we're cutting footage that's coming in, which is sometimes a blessing and a curse to be working at the same time as footage is coming in, just because you're shaping the story before you ultimately know sort of how it's ending, and it makes it helpful because we're not just diving into a complete pile all at once and having to sift through it. But we have an amazing team of assistants who really help us categorize everything. We're all in Avid, so everything's meticulously labeled and really both with the assistant team that we have and our story producers do a bulk of that organization, and really laying out nice select string outs for us to kind of pull stories from.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting. You talk about sort of the rolling thing and dealing with the footage and not knowing where you're going to go, because it was a similar circumstance that we had, but ours is mostly found footage. So it was a lot of hundreds of hours of found footage archival that was then backed with interview. And so as we were stringing out story and trying to structure story with the interview, we were often double teaming archival, just trying to get through it all, trying to understand what it had so that we could then form it up around the story. And actually, and it was constantly like flexing and moving as we shifted everything, having to pull new pieces to, shore up problems in the story, whatever. Interesting parallels.
Yeah, and I think similarly, I mean, it really took a big team to manage all this footage because there were more hours of these recorded classes than any of us could watch in full. And so, yeah, we had some amazing AEs and story producers. I want to especially shout out our archival producer, Jesse Hart, too, who really lived and breathed these classes. That really, I think that was really great because we could have lots of different reactions to this footage on processing it. And so sometimes we would respond to something and think, wow, this is an amazing moment. We have to build a scene around this. This really gets to the heart of it. Sometimes, one of our assistants might see something and flag it and say, hey, I think this was really great. Take a look at this for this scene. And so I think that was really helpful because I think as editors, we probably have all experienced that thing of your first reactions are gold, right? Like your initial impressions of footage are so valuable, and you want to hang on to those for when you are inevitably like deep in the process and losing perspective a little bit. So I think being able to have all these different people kind of responding to this material for the first time was really helpful.
Well, because you bring up as well, like having a team, you have a lot of footage constantly changing. You're following this path, maybe following this other path. When do you notice what those golden nuggets are, which path to follow, and how do those decisions come about to say like, all right, this is where we're heading?
Yeah, on WREXHAM, there's a lot of there's so many different characters that come from, a similar area and a similar walk of life. But, listening to people's stories, what was amazing about all of our characters was that they were just so open, and would share deep, intimate stories about their personal lives and their struggles and things that were going along. And, for me, it's always whatever the visceral reaction is. If I notice myself start to cry a little bit or tear up, or if I feel, just those heartstrings, I know that there's something on there that people will also attach to. And the same thing with, the sort of offbeat nature of characters in a small town that elicits some of that comedy as well. If you're chuckling along, sometimes it's funny because I won't realize that I'm laughing along with it. And then I'm like, whoa. And I'll have to go back and make sure to mark that moment or pull it to be used later.
Yeah, so also with WREXHAM, like we're really tied to the season, how it went, like the dates and when games actually happened, matches happened. So it's like we take our stories and we've seen them, but we don't know the outcomes of the matches. So we literally kind of have to wait and see until some matches are done to figure out how we can pay off those stories, not also in the match, but overall. So it's like the matches also help our story as well.
Yeah, the one additional thing. Yeah, that's it's sort of a Rubik's Cube in that way that, you've got like a really heartfelt story. You've got all these stories or telling a story about a character. And the interesting thing is it's kind of through the lens of them all being fans of the team. So a lot of times, we'll have to find characters or we'll find stories that match up with kind of what's going along with the match, so that we're building, to a particular triumph or what happens after the match. And so to keep those emotional sort of storytelling on point, it's a little bit of kind of back and forth to make sure that recipe is right.
That's interesting because it was like it's sort of similar for us, except that instead of waiting or trying to find ways to manipulate like the actual event, it was like we're trying to find echoes of like things that happen so we can pair them up and have the story resonate. I'm sure you guys are doing similar work, like trying to find thematic roots through these things to make the whole season mean something rather than just like the individual moments. It's interesting. I hadn't considered how the sort of reality of the situation might back you guys up and like, either really help you or really put you in a corner.
Well, Mimi and Martin, it's for you. Escaping Twin Flames follows several different character arcs. How did you and your co-editors balance these arcs and ensure each storyline was given its due in the edit.
Yeah, I mean, we had so many really amazing participants in this series, and of course, we had a limited runtime, so we had to be really judicious in thinking about, what role each character would play in the story, and how best to kind of move the larger story of Twin Flames along through their scenes. And I think one thing I'll say about that is that this was an area where we did have to be really collaborative, and the approach we took to the show, initially each editor, kind of took one character arc, but as we were deeper in the edit, we were all kind of working. Martin and Kevin Hibbard and I each kind of oversaw one episode, but we were really kind of moving back and forth and moving scenes. And I think that really freed us up. The fact that we could trust one another to, hand a scene off or take a scene from someone else meant that we didn't have to be just tied to what we had in front of us in an episode, or what the initial ideas had been. It meant that we could be flexible and adaptable, and if we realized like, oh man, this scene actually, this should be the cliffhanger of episode 1, we could do that. And so I think we needed to be able to be flexible and be able to move things around a lot to really find the puzzle pieces that click to really make the whole story kind of shine.
Yeah, I think like there's two parts to it, right? Like the sort of mechanics of the editorial itself, and like how to get things so that they're moving correctly inside, the show, and so the show works. But then there's also the sort of making sure that the arcs reflect the sort of emotional impact and the resonance of the piece itself. So I think it was real complex across the board, but one of the things that we had to really apply ourselves to, at least, and it was hard for me because I like to put sort of the clamps on the edit sometimes, but to actually give the subjects more space to speak their own minds and not to put too much sort of narrative pressure on the edit, or not too much editorial pressure on the narrative, so to speak. So like really let the narrative sort of the subjects direct themselves, I guess.
Well, you brought up the collaboration with your co-editors. I mean, like now getting a little bit, I guess, technical. I mean, like, was this done remotely in an office, and how does it actually look like? Say, how do you communicate? I mean, having constant discussions, conversations. I guess this applies to everyone here. Nowadays, obviously, a lot of us being remote. How does that look like now? I guess, especially in something like this, maybe it's a bit more complex and just so many moving pieces and people involved.
Yeah, I mean, for us, we definitely, everybody's remote. Like you said, we're all jumping into to other systems, on the other side of the world sometimes, in collaboration with producers who are overseas that are filming. We also, Slack, is pretty standard now, I feel like, for a lot of people, but it's a lot of Slack work, and we also made sure, we communicating as much as possible. If we need to have a quick Zoom, to communicate something directly as opposed to an email or just a message, making sure that we have three check-ins a week. We would do a Monday, Wednesday, Friday check-in, just to kind of make sure that everybody feels supported and is, kind of aligned, and what we were doing as a whole. So that was, it's just being open to being available, at any time to stop, and you don't really have the don't knock door hanger anymore, if you're busy on something. So a lot of times you kind of sacrifice that a little bit by just being available, but I think it makes the process, so much better to do that.
Well, Michael Anthony Brown and Michael Oliver, this question's for you. You both have a wealth of experience editing sports media. How is Welcome to WREXHAM compared and contrasted with your work, say, on other pieces of sports storytelling?
Mike, do you want to take this?
Yeah, I could take it. So how WREXHAM is different is we're mainly focused on the town people, the regular people, the fans more. And the team's there, and we do tell a story about the team, but it's about the town as well. And anytime we usually do other sports shows and all that, it's really just about the team. You don't really get involved with the fans. You don't get involved with the community at all. It's mainly just about the team, the inside team, because that's, what some people want. So for Welcome to WREXHAM, it's not just the team, it's everybody. It's the town, it's the, the fans. So that I would say is probably the biggest difference between when we usually do regular sports docs than with Welcome to Wrexham.
The other thing that's interesting is we have two pretty big main characters in Ryan and Rob who also are on their own specific little journey about learning how the sport is played, which is different than usually we're doing, some serious docs where, you're talking about coaches, the ins and outs, and you're getting hyper specific about technique or skills or, strategies for the game and things that set, these micro little differences between camps. And, having this sort of third story of Rob and Ryan's discovery of the game and their discovery of the love of the game. And, I think that was something that was always really fun to throw into the mix when we're thinking about story, trying to suss out exactly, how much Rob and Ryan are we telling, and showing their part of the story and integrating it with the town members who are also sort of discovering this new world of Hollywood coming to their town, and kind of out of obscurity, being able to witness these people.
Would you say also, I guess the approach to editing or approaching these projects is different, I suppose? I mean, like having maybe also different sensibilities or.
Yeah, I mean, I think that, in a lot of the past projects, there is a cinematic intensity to cutting sports. And I think that being able to bring that into the matches and sort of have this balance of, doing this sort of reality based, storytelling and tracking people's lives, on the daily or, as they go through things, matched with this very cinematic way of storytelling in sports, was actually something that was a lot of fun to get to those moments whenever we were able to kind of go back into the chops of cutting, hyper intense, music and slow-mo and the beauty of the game and all of those, layering all of that stuff into the edits, was falling back onto a similar approach for those, for sure.
Very, very cool. Mimi and Martin, going back to Escaping Twin Flames, I mean, like this documentary manages to navigate its touchy subject matter with incredible compassion and grace. What kinds of considerations go into your storytelling as an editor in order to maintain that level of sensitivity?
Yeah, well, first of all, thank you for saying that. And I think that starting on this series, knowing the sensitivity of the subject matter was kind of like the biggest challenge and the greatest concern going into the edit, because there's a certain point at which these cult leaders start having these coerced gender transitions, and I think we were all really, really aware that that was a storyline that could really be co-opted by bad actors, and it could be spun to harm trans people who are already subject to so much violence and bigotry right now. And so we thought really carefully about the edit and how to navigate those storylines. And I think one thing that was really important is that our showrunners, Cecilia and Inbal, did an amazing job of creating this environment where we could have arguments. I think we really had these like big spirited conversations about it. And I think everyone felt really able to express differing opinions and to really get in the weeds about it, because I think that was really necessary to make sure that we were telling the story responsibly and doing it justice. But in the end, I think the way I mean, I'm really, really proud of what we did on it and how we kind of made it work. And I think that kind of getting to the heart of it was realizing that it wasn't just like there was this cult story and then there's this other part about it, but that idea was really kind of central to what the show was. And there's a line from one of our experts in the show, Dr. Cassius Adair, who says something like anyone who's watching in horror about what these cult leaders are doing have a lot in common with the trans community. And I think showing how what Jeff and Shalia were doing was creating this notion that it's up to the people who have power over you to determine your gender identity instead of it being up to every individual. And that's the same kind of idea that really harms trans people as well. So that's part of the thinking that went into. I don't know if you have more to add there too, Martin.
I mean, it was a great experience. As an editor, I come at everything with the assumption that I'm generally wrong. And that like however I'm thinking about something is as much a way to facilitate somebody else's thought process about something as it is to actually come up with a product. So this wasn't that much different in that we did a lot of listening, we did a lot of talking, we had constant communication with GLAAD. We had an extremely supportive group around us that helped facilitate all of those conversations and like make everybody feel like they could be heard and they could say the things that they need to say. It was a wonderful experience, honestly. Like just from a work perspective, it was a great place, and it was I found it to be really productive and like great. And honestly, in the end, it's always the same kind of stuff with making docs. You have to remember you're dealing with real people. They deserve respect. They deserve empathy. Like this is the baseline of making documentary. Really, if you're not doing that, then you're not doing a good job. You're not doing your work.
No, I mean that's very interesting to hear. I mean, I think obviously well, I would think that sometimes it's you try to push things right in the story, but having that just been remembering maybe having that sensitivity, right? Remember who the people you're talking about dealing with. I mean, it's just I think that fine balance, and I think that like you said, talking to your team and having those discussions, having that open environment, inviting, say, arguments maybe or whatever. I mean, like. But it's good to, I guess, cultivate that environment where you can collaborate and share those ideas.
Yeah, it all starts from the top too. Like, I mean, they came in with these ideas and with the understanding this was going to be difficult, and so it was nurtured from the beginning. I can't say enough, honestly.
Well, jumping back to Welcome to Wrexham, Michael Anthony Brown and Michael Oliver with Ryan Reynolds and Rob McElhenney on board. It is no surprise that Wrexham is as funny as it is dramatic. How do you approach comedy in cutting together real life stories?
Well, I mean, I think that obviously, you could throw a dart at Ryan and Rob any day of the week and get, comedy or, drama out of them, depending on, if they're, taking part of watching the match or, if they're trying to cut, the ice with people that they're meeting around town or anything like that. But one of the things that we really thought about early on when portraying the town is that, similarly, these are real people. They've never had cameras before in their lives. They don't know, not to say things so there was a level of that in their creations for each of their stories. But you also, sort of identified characters that would bring the comedy and that had a natural wit about them or a natural ability to have just great timing. And so it was never a point for us to like force comedy. We weren't going to force music. We weren't going to force, really heavily just manipulated sort of scenes. We let it rise to the top. Whenever we saw it, we just tried our best to facilitate, the natural progression of a character's journey. And to our surprise and amazement, most of the characters sort of would ride that roller coaster. They would experience joy, and I think it also went in tandem with the matches. Again, it was, the town, after a loss, there's a mood about it. Everybody's week sort of revolves around what's happening on the field. And we always said it's almost like their church. They go 2 times a week, maybe they're not always home games, but they're certainly traveling. It's a long bus ride home when you're traveling 5 hours in a bus to go to the farthest away game, after you've lost. And so, those natural sort of rhythms within the story was something that we, relied on to keep the narrative flowing. That, the comedy itself, we had one character that we really relied on was Humphrey Kerr, who actually moved his life over there for months at a time away from his family. But he was sort of our explainer about, what was going on in the game, the sort of nuts and bolts of like how the European Football League works. And so, and he was born in Great Britain, and he has a natural sensibility at him also to sort of elevate everything with comedy and wit. And he's a writer on Rob's shows before this. And so we would use him for sort of a mood elevator, or anytime we needed to like explain something that was going on with the actual business of football. But yeah, mostly just facilitating, again, trying to be truth tellers, and also just portraying life sort of as it is, and not putting too much of a heavy hand on it, was something we strive for.
Yeah, Rob and Ryan are just, what you see is that's naturally them. They made our job a lot easier with the comedy because they know exactly when to bring in the comedy and when to be calm and sensitive. So those two are brilliant, and again, like Mike said, everything's natural. I mean, we never force anything. If they said something in an interview or if they said something in the scene, that's just them. It wasn't written or anything. That's just who they are. And so bring the comedy in some spots. It was just really easy and very natural for us.
Well, that's very cool. I mean, like, obviously having these professional, trained actors, but then having like just fans of the game, right? And how they manage all that. So it's great to have that access to that.
Well, and early on too, I think that there was not, they'd never been on camera in personal lives to this amount either. It's always scripted. It's always, there's a plan, there's a mission and all this stuff. So I think it took a little while for them to also get used to having cameras over their shoulders at every moment. And so that's, I think, why that naturalness, that natural feeling, that really comes out of them is exactly what it is.
And those two are very comfortable with being made fun of. So, we can bring it if we got creative and just to give them a little jab, they're all for it. So that's what's awesome about it. They're very welcome to anything artistically or anything like that, just to up the show.
Well, just curious. I mean, how familiar were you with like soccer, and how did that come into play, say, working on this project?
For me, it did. I've been working in sports my whole life, but I played soccer, we call it football now, all my life. I played throughout college, and I'm actually one of the main editors for the World Cups on Fox Sports. So I do all the United States teams. I do all the big championships. So for me, it was just natural. It comes naturally to me. I know the sport inside and out. So it's bringing my two worlds together. My personal time where I love sports and I love soccer, and bringing my TV editing experience in to make the matches more dynamic, more, impactful, cinematic. So for me, this was like the perfect show. It brings all my worlds together as one.
Yeah, I mean, I think I was a fan of football always. Growing up, I played it a bit, and then it fell off to other things. But the English football system is something that I didn't really know anything about. It's a very complex, system to explain to viewers, especially if you're trying to get going, especially for the first season. But in the second season, we also introduced the women's team, where they have a whole different set of rules. It works very similarly with promotion and relegation, but I not knowing that system, I think not knowing actually was a benefit as well, just because you're able to sort of figure out and think like a viewer would. How much information do you need? Do you need it all spelled out right at once, or can you just sort of like dole it out throughout the episode, and place it where it's appropriate? And so. I actually think in some ways the not knowing definitely helped me be able to like facilitate that sort of information to the audience.
Awesome. Well, look at now. I guess a question for everyone. Maybe get a little bit more technical, talk shop a little bit. I mean, what does your editing bay look like for your specific project? I mean, are there like certain things like peripherals or decorations? I don't know. How do you set it up? Just curious. Maybe start with you.
Yeah, so I work out of like a co-working space. So my editing bay is a little cubicle in this room, and I've got my two monitors, and it works really well for me. It's for me, it's the happy medium between working from home and working in an office. I'm about a 10-minute walk from my home, but it still gives me that I'm a person who needs that kind of separation, between work and life, to be able to not just be constantly working. So that's how I have it set up. But yeah, it works pretty well for me, especially with so much work being remote these days.
Oh, well, this is, I think, my first, going back to 2021 when I started on WREXHAM, I think it was my first time working in the light, being at home and not having like a blacked out room. So like, it's been a couple years of like learning how to deal with You know, and I've come to enjoy it, like having a window and like putting a bird feeder outside. Like I feel very like I'm in my old man era, but like I kind of like it. Like I feel like I should start naming the hummingbirds or something. But like you know, I really enjoy being home. I've got the 3 monitors set up. It's very simple. I use a pen. A tablet is my friend, so like I love you know, being able to use the tablet. But yeah, I mean, and you know, I just enjoy it. I also I put on TCM on a TV in another room that just like has that, like I just have it on almost like an ambiance candle of just like old movie sounds. And there's something about it that's like very calming and relaxing. And you know, if I'm out to like walk to get something from the fridge, like you know, there's like an iconic scene on or something that I can pass by that's like a little, you know, break from the screens.
Well, I see the drum set there. I'm just curious because I also have one right behind me.
Yeah, yeah,
And
yeah,
I
yeah.
feel like I step away from the computer and like literally jam out for like 5 minutes and it clears my head. I don't know.
Yeah, no, it's awesome. It's great. It's like a small little rhythm kit, little folk kit, but yeah, just to like tap out some rhythms and kind of get out of your head is like it's definitely awesome.
So for me, if you can see, this is my edit bay. I just got a small little room. It's upstairs in my house to be separate from my kids when they're home. But got the monitors. I usually have some candles up on my speakers and everything, battery ones, just to help me relax. And I have an oil diffuser just to like really help me to relax as much as possible. Because in our world, we can get really locked into an edit. You forget to blink sometimes. So it helps with the moisture to keep my eyes and everything going. And just trying to be as relaxed as possible because you know it does get stressful at times, and it's just like anything helps to help you just like release the tension, just try to relax and just remember like, hey, you got this, and just take one step at a time.
Anything for you, Martin?
I work out of my bedroom, so my setup is pretty sparse. I have an old dining room table that I refinished that serves as my desk. So I have a big flat area that I can clutter up and then push to the side and then clutter up and then clear off in one big swoop after the job. So I'm not sure it's totally healthy, you know, from a mentality standpoint, but it works for me. And my dog's got a nice place to fall asleep under the thing. And when, you know, to Mike's point or Michael's point, when I get stressed, I can go outside and be outside and take a walk around the block. And I mean, it's a whole lot better than commuting. I'm in heaven.
Well, thank you for you know, bringing us into your cutting rooms. I hope our listeners, your viewers, will find some inspiration maybe into their own cutting rooms. But I mean, like, it's good to say share this because you know, obviously, look at this is what we do, right? To just, you know, stay healthy, right, and creative because it can be, like I said, challenging at times and stressful. Just one last question as we wrap up here. Now, as an Emmy nominee, what advice would you give yourself, maybe also to our listeners, just starting out in your career? This is for everyone.
Oh man.
My go-to line is always trust the process. I think that's been the big thing that's been so important for me to learn and that I always come back to now. I think every single project I've ever worked on, I always have a moment where it seems impossible. I'm like, this can't be done. It won't happen, you know, totally impossible. And every single time it all works out in the end. And so I've just come to understand that that moment is just part of the process of getting to a final product you're really happy with. And so I think learning your process and then really trusting it has been really helpful for me and something I could have benefited from knowing earlier on too.
I still have a problem. I know it happens every time and I still do it. It's terrible.
Still that moment of terror.
Yeah, no, like psychologically, I can never quite prepare myself for what it's going to be like. But I think, you know, psychologically, I think that's true. And then I think creatively also, like, trust your instincts, right? You know, you may not want to trust your instincts psychologically or emotionally, but you may trust them, you know, creatively, and like understand that, like, oftentimes the things that get you into trouble early in your career because you're not making our show or this isn't our show are in the long term the things that will make you an asset for whoever you work for, because those are the things that you're getting different insight into approaches or different insight into cuts, things like that. The things that make you different are your strengths.
I mean, I would say probably also along those lines, figuring out your strengths and do editing the way that you are good at, apply that to wherever you're doing. I mean, I started working and, cutting smaller features for television poker, but like always wanted to be a cinema editor. I wanted to make things more cinematic. So like taking those skills and applying them to whatever you're editing, and try to sort of like bringing that style and bringing what you have, I think is important to keep pushing, even if it means, you have to do things maybe a couple of times, but trying out different versions, but give yourself that first pass to really, make what you want to make, because along the lines, there will be people that will be like, hey, I like this. This is different than what we normally do, but this is cool. So like give yourself that first pass to really trust your instincts in the same way of like bringing the creativity that you have to give. And I think that, things will fall into place, and you'll keep going on the path that suits you for sure.
I would say just learn patience and don't take anything personally, because there's a lot of people's jobs out there. Their job is to tell you what you're doing wrong. So you gotta learn just to let that go. You might not agree with them and you think they're wrong, but sometimes for us, you just have to be like, all right, well, that's what we got to do. So being patient and just not taking things personally would be a great thing to learn, which I'm still learning because I still have a hard time with it. I think we all still have a hard time with it. But the other thing I would say is don't be afraid to be creative. Don't be afraid to bring something to the table. There's nothing wrong with taking a stab at something or, pitching something to the producers. Hey, how about we do this? Something creative, something that is something out of the box, because a lot of people are stuck inside the box. Why don't you share what you think is outside the box to help bring up the story?
Well, great advice there from everyone. Thank you for sharing that, and also for sharing some insights into your projects. And of course, best of luck at this year's Emmys. Have fun, enjoy it. But that's all the time we have for today. Thank you to our panelists, Michael Anthony Brown, Michael Oliver, Mimi, and Martin, for being here with us today to discuss their incredible work.
Thank you so much, Joaquin.
Thank you.
Thank you
also-
so much.
And also thank you to Impact 24 PR for putting this panel together, and to all of you for watching and listening. Be sure to check out the Hollywood Editing Mentor podcast for other panels and interviews.